Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to introduce you to a woman named Tina Cartwright. She has a brand called Rebranding Motherhood, and she talks about motherhood issues. Why is it important to have her on this podcast about fertility treatment, donor conception, and surrogacy? Because so many of you, and I know because I've been there, think about issues about feeling marginalized, feeling different, feeling anxious about how to talk to your future child, about bonding, about postpartum depression. There's so many concerns that so many parents or parents to be have. And as our community grows, I see it more and more. So I wanted to make sure that I address these issues with you. And I think she has a great message and will be very helpful. So let's roll the tape. Welcome to Building Your Family. This is a podcast about donor conception, surrogacy, fertility treatment, and all the ways the modern family is built. I'm your host. My name is Lisa Schumann. I'm a published author, a licensed therapist, and I am passionate about helping people have a better path to parenthood and a better parenting experience. And to that end, today I have a guest that's a little bit different than the guests I've had before. Her name is Tina Cartwright, and you will meet her and see why she is so popular. She has a group called Rebranding Motherhood. And for all of you out there who are parents or even parents to be, you will be interested in what she has to say because she is helping equalize our experience as parents. And I think that's so important for our community because as you go down this journey to be a parent in a way that's not conventional, you may be feeling different. You may be feeling other. And it's so important for you to feel good inside of yourself and good with your children. So I'm going to introduce you to Tina and we're going to talk about exactly that. Welcome, Tina.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor.
Oh, you're welcome. It's great to have you here. And I'm so happy, especially now, because although I've been running workshops for donor conceived children and families for decades, we now have our family building platform and we have a whole parenting section. And so I think more and more people will be interested in all of these issues. They are so relevant to our community and you speak so much about them. So I thought perhaps we can start to talk a little bit about your belief system and how you feel parenting is equal for everyone, even though we all have different experiences.
Yeah, I mean, for me, in my experience, I felt also very disconnected with the served communities that were thrown at me as a parent. I would scroll through my Instagram and not see representation as a Black mother. I would not see representation showing really all of the different versions and stories of motherhood and parenting. What I love about this conversation and what I talk a lot about on with my community is that motherhood is just like a snowflake. Every single person that enters in has a completely different fabric and thread. They're showing up differently. They've come to the experience differently. And that's actually the beauty that really unites us together as a whole. And so for me, coming out of my first pregnancy, I went into a PMAD, which is a perinatal mood and anxiety disorder, specifically postpartum depression. And I just felt like there was way too much sanitized imagery. I felt like, one, there wasn't representation, like we just said. But then what I would see was just amplifying my guilt, amplifying my shame, and just continued to just drill into me that I'm doing the things wrong and not supporting, uplifting, and frankly, providing a lot of these incredible resources like your platform, Lisa, and your community that, frankly, I have to be a lucky one that somebody knows you and sent it to me, or somebody knows that this exists and comes my way. So, really, my objective is to create a space where I'm proactively giving these insights, proactively sharing all of these different resources. So, to me, I'm honored to get to have a conversation around fertility in that space because I think that's another dark hole of motherhood that frankly faces a lot of stigmatism and a lot of really an opportunity to tell more stories there. So that's a little about my kind of brand and what I'm doing here.
Absolutely. I think that that's so important. And you raise this issue of postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety, which is something that anyone can have, whether you have a donor conceived child or not, whether you use fertility treatment or not. And even though we look at surrogates and try to make sure they haven't had previous experiences of postpartum depression. It's always out there. It's always possible. And so during that experience, you might not feel so connected to your child. You might feel very inside of yourself and anxious about not being able to connect to your child or to your family, right? You might feel that you can't really function as a parent. And all of those things I think people really worry about when they've had a family in a different sort of way because they think they're more prone to it. But it's possible for everybody to experience this.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'll give you all some facts from like our generalized population of mothers and parents, but I think the latest stat is 1 in 5 mothers will experience a PMAD. But if you talk to any practitioner or anybody doing this work, especially post-pandemic, they'd say probably it's 1 in 3, 1 in 2 parents that are experiencing something along the spectrum of a PMAD. But the thing that has been so powerful to me as I've been leading this work is talking to some people that are leading in this space is that PMADs are 100% treatable. Any
Yeah.
type, whether it's postpartum psychosis, which is the extreme end of the spectrum, where you're
Hmm.
literally disconnected from reality, to postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety, which are probably the more common experiences within that, they're all treatable. And so I think it's two things. One, it can happen to any of us and it's treatable. So it's not
Hmm.
something to be
Hmm.
scared of. It's more so something to become educated on, understand the warning signs so that you can begin building a treatment plan because I think so many people suffer in it for way too long. And then it can really ripple into so many other aspects of your life.
So true and so important for people to realize. You also talk a lot about how important it is to regulate your nervous system so that you can bond with your child. And a lot of people in my community go into this whole process very anxious because they're kind of hurrying up to get pregnant and they've been through so much. They've been really beaten up by fertility treatment, really stressed about their donor or their surrogate or whatever. And so launching then into parenthood where you have then the sleepless nights and all of the difficulties, maybe a colicky baby, all of those things can be so stressful. So people really need to consider that in order to bond with their child, if not taking care of themselves is not enough of a reason, they certainly should understand that to bond with their child, they will be more productive if they can take care of themselves, right?
100%. So I actually got this question this past weekend when I was sitting on the panel for Doula Expo and I was having a conversation around the invisible load of motherhood. And the question came up around self care. And so the way I like to talk about self care is a couple of different thoughts and mindset shifts I think are so helpful for parents to internalize and adopt. And I think the first thing is you have to do the things to take care of yourself despite the guilt. The guilt will never go away in
Mm-hmm.
any format. No matter how you're a caregiver, you're going to feel guilty because society's systems that are set up around labor equity and how we take care of our families, especially in heteronormative relationships, are not
Mm-hmm.
set up where equality is the center point. So you're going to just have to know that no one's going to make it easy for you. You are lucky if that's your situation, but do that despite the guilt. That's kind of the first principle I want you to take in. The second principle that I think is really, really important is that you deserve to be taken care of too. Okay. All parents, all caregivers, you deserve
Mm-hmm.
the same quality and level of nurturing that you have, frankly, sacrificed in this specific example to bring your child into your family. If you're on a fertility journey, you even more so deserve to be taken care of and nurtured because you're coming into this space at a deficit. You're coming into this place probably physically depleted, I'm sure emotionally depleted, definitely mentally depleted. So you need to be coming into every day just like you deserve air as a human. You deserve to take care of yourself as a caregiver. And then the last mindset shift, and this is really a big one, is that sometimes when we think about self care, we really set the bar way too high. And somebody really
Mm-hmm.
laid this down for me, and I thought it was so on point, which is you should set the bar so low that you trip over it. Example,
Mm-hmm.
I'm cold, put something on your shoulders. I'm thirsty, wake up in the morning and drink some water, right? Little tiny things that you're doing for yourself all day long, instead of ignoring that voice that's literally itching and saying, oh, I'm hungry, I need a snack. Oftentimes, as parents, we ignore that just out of what we're dealing with, trying to take care of all the things. But I challenge you to begin listening to that and addressing those little needs in small ways throughout the day. And I promise you, it'll become addicting. You will become somebody that loves taking care of yourself and nurturing yourself, because really it amplifies your ability to do the things that make you you, to do the things that you love, and frankly, get you back to that part of yourself that you probably feel very disconnected from as you've entered into this fertility journey and you've entered into this journey now becoming a parent. So those are kind of the
Mm-hmm.
mindset shifts that I like to give people, to give them really the permission to start changing how they interact with taking care of themselves.
Yes, that is really helpful, and I think is so important for people to think about. I also want to add or and also talk to you about that self-care for a lot of people is, well, I'm just going to have that extra glass of wine or have five more cookies. And listen, we've all been there. I understand we need
Right.
to give ourselves some grace. However, if we can do some things like meditation or other things that are helpful to us, even a little bit, it really helps so much more.
Exactly. To your point, Lisa, it's thinking about things that are restorative to your nervous system. I'm going to give you guys all a tip. My best friend as an entrepreneur and as a busy mom looking for support as an invisible load is generative AI. Pick your chatbot. It doesn't matter. If you like OpenAI, do ChatGPT. Ask it, what are some ways to support or re-regulate my nervous system? So if you're not familiar, and or give yourself some grace, if you're like, you've just in this rut of like, oh, I'm gonna go get a manicure, oh, I'm gonna go have a glass of wine. Don't judge yourself, because society has not taught us these skills. This is not your
Yes.
fault that you don't know these things. So just use the little tips to like re-educate yourself on what are these categories of space that are really going to be restorative physically, mentally, and emotionally and spiritually to you, to fill you back up, because those other things are really, they're like fleeting and short, like supports, like they're really not like impacting your
It's
nervous
like a
system.
band-aid.
Exactly. And then like a
Mhm,
flimsy band-aid at that one that's like
mhm.
dirty and about to fall off.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. When we have a lot of resources on our platform, stress reduction techniques, videos about it. So those are all important. But as you said, Tina, it's also important for us to not put too much pressure on ourselves to do everything perfectly. We're going to mess up. And you have actually a very fun video on your platform. I suggest everybody look at it about you can't be the perfect mom. You can't be the perfect employee. You can't be look good all the time. It's really important to give yourself some space.
You have to give yourself grace in this journey. I was talking to a mom this recently, and she said something that really stuck to my bones, like a good cup of soup. And what she said was, I'm a good enough mom. I'm not a good mom, not a bad mom. I'm good enough. And that good enough, whether it's, let's say, caregiver,
Mhm.
because I don't know how we're coming into this space, but I'm a good enough caregiver is something I want to you to kind of put back in your head when the should police and the should storms start coming in and saying, oh, well, I should have done this. Oh, I should have done that. Well, you know what? Today you showed up on the court, you showed up on the field, and that's good enough. And
Yes.
tomorrow's good enough will look different. And the next day will look different. And it's really like, it's a trend line. Okay. We're not looking for how it shows up day to day. It's like, how are you showing up on average? And that's really what our kids remember, our children remember at the end of the
Mhm.
day. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's kind of
Yeah,
like,
it's very helpful. Actually, that was taken from a psychologist named Donald Winnicott, who created this good enough parenting idea. And his philosophy said that that is really ideal because you give yourself the ability to be good enough, then you're not self judging. And so you're less likely to stumble. But also, you're teaching your child that they could be good enough. You're not setting up these expectations that your child has to be perfect either.
exactly. And that's part of the making your journey day to day easier, because the like our children, I mean, no matter what the internet wants us to think, you can read as much stuff as you want, but if you are not acting in your purpose, if you're not acting in the ethics and the values by which you want your children to show up as, they're going to call bullshit. Like they're not going to believe
Mhm.
it. And so it's so important too. Like that's all we're trying to do as parents is like create independent, adjusted, regulated children that can operate in this world and deal with all of the ups and downs. And so part of that work is us showing up in that day to day and us reflecting that day to day to them, which means we show up not 100%. And then also
Yes.
repair is critical. I talk to
Yes.
my kids all the time. Mommy messed up. And it's
Mhm.
often, and I've messed up this, I've messed up that, and
Yep.
they've now become so comfortable that this is part of humaning, right? As a human, like, we make
Mhm.
mistakes, I don't show up always how I want to, but there's always this space to repair, to have a conversation, and
Yes.
come back, which takes some of that pressure off of us.
Yes, 100%. And that is a big issue in my community because there are so many people who feel concerned about talking to their children about their origins, and they're afraid they're going to get it wrong. They're afraid they're going to mess up. They're afraid. And so then that shame and embarrassment and anxiety causes them to postpone it further. And even though there's no time that's too early, there's no time that's too late, we could always do it. And so it's really important for everybody out there to listen to that and to remember that just because you haven't done it before doesn't mean you can't say, okay, I wish I had done X, Y, and Z before. I haven't. I'm going to do it now and I'm going to get the information I need and I'm going to move forward. It's so important to give yourself that space because it will just send you backwards if you don't.
100%. I mean, my parents had me naturally, or however, I don't know what the accurate
Hmm.
terminology is in your community to say it that way. And to be clear, I'm estranged from both of my parents. However, there was many things in my childhood I would have loved even a poor conversation about. Okay?
Hmm.
Like that was
Yes.
critical to my being and I never ever got it. And so as I've experienced a lot of childhood trauma, so I've really seeked out information and others that have experienced it. And I think one thing that brings us together is people who have really adjusted better. Their parents just attempted. And it
Yes.
may have been messy and it may not have
Yes.
been perfect, but having the people taking care of you who you think are that's your safe space, sharing information about who you are, like answering those questions that are unanswerable that just live within us, within our core is so powerful. So I just
So,
share that
yes.
with your community that there's really no wrong way because it's this gift that you're giving to your child that they will take and there's no wrong way to give that gift. I think that's my personal opinion.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's so important. I think it's really helpful because so many people feel uncomfortable with it. And then they say, well, I'm not going to do it. It's too late. I don't want to talk to my child about this issue, or there's this problem and I don't want to discuss it with them now. And so it'll just go away. Or, my family is a very non traditional family. So I'll let my kids figure it out. And although parents, I understand, are anxious about it, as you said, no adult would ever think, wow, if my parent came to me even at this point and said, I'm really sorry I didn't talk to you about this earlier, I want to share with you, nobody would be upset with that. Everybody would welcome their parents to do that, right? So
100%.
we all need to give ourselves room to say it's not over. That door is not closed. You always can come back to your kids and be there for them, even if you haven't before. You can always repair it. I totally agree with you, Tina.
Yeah, it's powerful. I mean, when it becomes traumatic is when these outside people who aren't in your circle begin telling you stories. And then there's these feelings of, at least ones that I experienced of, it's almost like a betrayal. Like, I don't want to like put a hard
Hmm.
label on it, but it's a sense of like, well, why didn't they just tell me? Like, I
Yes.
wish they would have just told me versus these other people and that's hard to wind back on. So to your point, I think any child would always welcome that from their caregiver because that's bravery and we have to model that for them as well.
Yes, absolutely. Now, what about shame? Because that's something that you talk a lot about on your platform, Tina. And how do you address people who feel ashamed or marginalized in some way and they can't get themselves out of that spot where they feel different, they feel other, they feel like disconnected from, in our community, some moms may feel different than other moms, right? If they didn't deliver their baby and they're sitting around with people who are talking about delivery or breastfeeding and they haven't done that, or if they're the child's donor conceived and people are really focused on, well, the baby looks like you or looks like you, and they feel very disingenuous sharing with other people, oh, well, yeah, that's because we're both, I don't know, Irish or whatever it might
Yep.
be. When people have these feelings of feeling different and feeling other, because that's what you talk about so much, what do you talk to your community about and how do you help them get more comfortable with that?
I'll just continue to share stories of connectiveness. Like that's kind of
Hmm.
my goal is to really bring your community into the Gen Pop. Not that we're the normal, but what society is calling is normal in this space and connecting it to things I feel all the time. So my children are mixed race. So I deal with people constantly disconnecting me from my children, especially if I'm not wearing my wedding ring. It's assumed that I'm help or that I'm the nanny and
Wow.
all of these different pieces. So I grapple with that often. I think a lot of parents who have vaginally delivered or not also experience that. And honestly, within the sphere of caregiving, I would say every single parent has some space where they feel that way because they didn't breastfeed and they were supposed to, because they breastfed and they used formula and society says they're not supposed to, because they decided to let their kids eat solids earlier and the internet says they shouldn't. Like it's infinite. I could literally list 1,010 different examples that I connect within my community and talk to moms about. Single mothers. I talk to a lot of single parents that also feel like they're not doing it right because they didn't have a partner or because they've decided to be a single parent by choice. And society says, well, where's your partner? Or because I don't want to work or because I do want to work. Like, I just
Hmm.
want to share with you all that I don't want to say you're not special, but we're all feeling that. We are all feeling that sensation that we're not doing it the way we're supposed to do it. And that is a reflection of society and this really intense imagery that really depicts a very singular binary image of what parenting, what motherhood, or what caregiving is supposed to look like. And every person who's listening to this knows from day one to the day that the kids are 18, no day looks the same ever. We don't ever
Hmm.
show up the same ever. It's
Hmm.
always constantly different. And so that's kind of like just one general point that I would love to just put out there for people to really bring us all together further and allow you the space to feel more connected, even deeper. And then the other thing I would say around shame and guilt that I think has been a really helpful tool for me, and this isn't to recommend that we all do parts work, but it really gives a framework for kind of what's going on in there. And I'm a visual person. So like understanding like kind of what's happening in there has helped me to kind of take back control. And so as you think about this voice, that is like one of many different parts of yourself that are showing up to the table to drive how you show up in the world. Your truest self, like your core, I'm sure believes you're a great parent, you're a great caregiver, and probably is giving you more grace than you're able to hear. But that one part of us that's like powered by shame and guilt, that's telling, it's really the should police, right? Anytime your head is saying should, okay, I want you to reply with should not, okay? But it's when that starts happening, that's when guilt is beginning. And shame is when that just takes a whole nother life of itself. And so just reminding yourself that that's the dynamic that's happening. And so some of the tools I think are really, really critical are like, what's your intake, right? Like, what's your social media feed like? Do you need to probably do a detox? Do you need to probably like unfollow some people in your life? You might need to detox as well. There's
Hmm.
probably a lot of people that are not really supporting where your family's journey is going to go. First of all, where your family's journey has been You've probably been
Yes.
through a really unique space. So I would empower you to lean deeper into the community, into the spaces that see you fully, and starting there. Because it's really hard. I know I'm not trying to sit here and say it's like super easy to create these ultimate boundaries or even create soft boundaries in our life around the people that are part of our like broader community, our broader villages. But it's really, really important to me. That's part of our work as parents. I tell my kids all the time, my number one job is to keep you safe. That's like my number one thing. That's going to show up differently how I'm doing that. But part of that is also like, who's keeping my head space safe? Who's keeping my mental space
Mm-hmm.
safe? Who's continuing to support and see some of the unique struggles and challenges that I'm going through? And I would imagine in the fertility space, there's going to be a lot of unique experiences that you're going through. And so lean into the people in the spaces like your community, Lisa, where people get it and people understand. That's okay. It's okay to totally revitalize who's in
Mm-hmm.
your circle once you become a parent. I will tell you that's the number one thing I am continually like doing. I am continually
Mm-hmm.
deciding and recalibrating who is emotionally, from a value standpoint, and even how they're showing up for themselves and showing up for their families, that are able to come into my close circle, because our mental health is so precious and so fragile. And so it's really an active practice to protect and keep that safe. I don't know if that
Mm-hmm.
answers the question.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's also, it helps our kids, right? Because, we talk a lot in our discussion about creating a narrative for your child, about helping your child know that they're the same as everybody else, right? We all need a sperm and egg and a uterus, but we also are different, and that needs to feel acceptable. And we need to be able to embrace that, because our children are going to have to embrace these things. They're going to need to feel that they can honor how they came into the world, but also understand that in the end, they're the same as everybody else. And those are things are so important for children too. And so when we as parents, I think, get stuck in this situation where we have to be in this mommy's group because that's what all our neighbors are doing, and we feel so different from everybody else, and people are not welcoming or not warm or whatever you might say. I think that, as you said, it's really helpful to kind of dive into groups of people who are going to be there for you and accept you and support you, so that that will shore up your resources. Because if you're depleted for yourself, you can't be there for your kids either.
No, 100%. And again, just continuing to remind yourself that, at least where I felt in this way, is like, I think you have to diverge. Like, divergence is a critical survival tool in modern day parenting. Okay. Because modern day parenting, the sphere, like, we don't have great information generally. It's not universally shared where we're inclusive and represent different ways of showing up as a parent or feeding your children, nurturing your children,
Mm-hmm.
disciplining your children, all the different potty training your children, sleep training your children. There's a
All of it.
very singular way from an imagery standpoint that we share this, that we show the ways to do it. And so I'm always trying to empower people, like, diverge. That's why I created Rebranding Motherhood. I had to diverge because I couldn't find a space that I wanted. That
Hmm.
was empowering me, that was giving me the tools and the information that frankly like would have filled me up, that would have been filling my soul up and would have been feeling supportive. So I would empower you to be a leader and to show that to your kids, that the mass of communities and society don't always have to dictate. Let's all be independent thinkers. Okay, you know what's
Mm-hmm.
best for you and your family, and go towards that.
Yes. 100%. Well, I think that that is so helpful, and for people to think about at every step of this journey, but certainly when you become a mom, if you're a mom, or when you will become a mom, these things will be so valuable for you to hold on to. And as Tina's saying, you need to be able to embrace them so that you can be there for yourself, because we don't know what the journey is going to look like, right? You don't know if your kid's going to be colicky, or your kid's going to have trouble potty training, or any of these things, right?
And it's constantly changing. I mean, That's the
Hmm.
other thing. Society gives you, I could go on and on around the sanitized imagery because it's so insane. Like the narratives that they spew out to us makes us think that all of our journeys will be very the same. And they're not the same. Like my children
No.
are constantly evolving and transforming day to day, hour to hour, and it continues to change and evolve. And so I think us all staying in this space of knowing it's going to be a dynamic journey is going to just prepare us better to weather what we're all
Yes.
going to be experiencing throughout the full journey of parenthood, grandparenthood. I mean, postpartum is forever. I hate to say it, y'all, but it's
Yes,
forever.
it is forever, right? And it's so true. And parents, I think, don't really see that coming, right? You see these stories of women, these very powerful women who have their first baby and they want to be stay at home moms. And then you see these other women who say, I'm going to be a stay at home mom. And then they have the crying baby and they go, you know what? Get me back to work. I'm done, right?
Exactly. I'm out.
Exactly. It's not for me. And just because you've been through a fertility treatment or because you wanted a baby so badly or spent the time and the energy and the money and everything to have the child doesn't mean you love the child any less if you want to go back to work. You need to be your own person. And, toddlerhood is different than infancy, and that's different than the teenage years. And at any point, you might feel differently, and that's all okay.
Yes, 100%. I mean, I had struggles with, well, it was kind of a weird situation. I had like a pretty traumatic experience in the healthcare system, but I was really
Wow.
chronically sick for probably about 5 years. You can kind of see my stature. Imagine I was about 20 pounds lighter. I was
Oh,
super, super sick. I was having like insane GI issues. I lived in Boston at the time. I'd been at all the top doctors, all the top hospital systems. And at some point throughout that 5 years, I lived in Minneapolis and I had been to the Mayo Clinic. And I really was not getting any answers. I was just kind of being like shuffled to the side, told, take fiber, like it's IBS, like here's your stamp, goodbye. And I'm like, something's so gravely wrong. So at one point, I was privileged enough at the time. I was working at a big company. I had really great insurance. So I basically decided to create my own healthcare plan. I went onto Google and basically like researched all the doctors in the area, like decided what was critical for what I thought I was experiencing and the types of really accolades and pedigrees that I wanted, like bedside manner, all these pieces. I found this amazing gastroenterologist and he really listened. I'll never forget it. My first appointment, we felt this huge lump in my abdomen. And essentially, like 6 to 8 weeks later, we end up finding, well, the first scan, it was a 19 centimeter mass. And then as
wow.
huge, y'all, that's not like, that's pretty big.
Yeah.
And then, like, after further tests, because that's just how it is in our system, we end up finding out that it was a 15 centimeter tumor in this ovary on this side. And then I had a 5 centimeter tumor on this side, which should have been seen multiple times in all of my checking ins on and checking ups on,
Yeah.
and they didn't. And so essentially, you all, I would have been right where you are if I was trying to have children. I was a millennial, so I was in that post recession rat race. So I hadn't yet started having children, even though I was in my late 20s, because I was in that same rat race. But if I had decided to start having children, I would have had crazy, or at least I would have been stamped with like crazy infertility issues, which really it was like something else going on. And so all that to say, like I had just been misdiagnosed and all this stuff. I finally got a surgery. I finally got better. And then after I got my clearance after my surgery, we had everything removed. We found out the tumors were benign, thank goodness. And so I was on that journey, and my doctor gave me the clearance to begin trying. And so we conceived my oldest daughter, who's now 6, like pretty much instantly after my miracle surgery, because it was really a disaster in there. And I remember, which is part of my postpartum depression journey, I remember very distinctly feeling like, what's happened? I was so euphoric during my pregnancy. I was like, one of those, like, this is so magic. I can't believe
Hmm.
it's happened. I worked so hard. Like, I went through this whole long chronic illness and surgeries and poking and prodding. And now I'm back on the other side. And then when I delivered, I instantly felt disconnected. I mean, I was like, it was like the body snatchers came in, took me out of my body. I didn't know what was wrong with me. And I remember feeling this sensation of, well, I should be really grateful because this is all I ever wanted. All I ever
Mm-hmm.
wanted was to be a mother and to kind of right the ship of what had happened to me as a child and to kind of set a different narrative. Why am I not more grateful? Why am I not enjoying this
Mm-hmm.
more? And the answer simply is because it's hard, y'all. It's really, really hard to literally change how you've been living in this world for your whole life, right? By the time most of us enter into parenthood, you've relatively figured out how to adult, right? You know how to like live, pay your bills, sustain yourself. You kind of figured it out. You've detached from whoever your caregivers are, and you're relatively taking care of yourself. And no one is telling us that, guess what? You're going to have to relearn how to do everything. You're going to have to relearn how to have relationships. You're going to have to relearn how to eat, have food. I mean, you're now going from a 12-hour rhythm to a 24-hour rhythm. Like you're taking care of another human being that no one is uploaded the information on how to really do that.
Correct.
Like,
Correct.
no one's
Right.
really
No
taught.
one.
They people think moms are supposed to know because we
Right.
had the baby, but no one's teaching us these things in school or in anything.
Right.
So we're all destined. I hate to say it, but we are destined in our current society, at least in the US for sure, to just show up into this place very confused, very bewildered, very like, wait, what's happening here?
Mm-hmm.
When we
Mm-hmm.
enter into parenting. So I just want to share my experience because we are all so connected, y'all, in this journey. And we are really going through a lot of the same challenges and a lot of the same feelings and a lot of the same otherness. But sadly, there's not enough spaces where we talk about that openly or that it's okay to show up. So
Right.
that's why I created my community, my brand, my platform, because I really wanted to uplift these stories because they're so common. So many
Yes.
people feel this way, but they're just not talking about it.
Right. And you need a safe space to talk about it.
You do. You really,
Yes.
really do. You really do.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, that's great information. I really appreciate, Tina, you being so open with us about your history and all these experiences, because I think it's really helpful to hear for our community because everybody, I think, has these feelings at one point or another. And, we're all in it to help each other. And if you're with somebody or connected to people who are not there for you, who don't have your back, then you need to move on. Right. So,
Exactly. Yes,
yeah.
be comfortable. Be comfortable. Boundaries are going to be your best friend. And guess
Yes.
what? Everybody has to re-earn their boundaries. When people keep
Right.
breaking them too much, it's okay for them to get new boundaries. Like I'm empowering us all to have that
Mhm.
mindset because
Mhm.
your mental health deserves that type of safety at a minimum.
Yes, without question, without question. Well, I think that's a perfect place for us to wind down, Tina. Thank you so much for coming. Where can people find you? Because I think all of this information that you're sharing and what we're talking about is so valuable to our audience. So how can people reach out to you?
Yeah, you all can find me on Instagram on our community page at rebranding.motherhood.com. You'll notice my little pink hat, like this is my color. You'll see that. You can also find us
Mhm.
on our webpage, which is www.rebrandingmotherhood.co. And you can also Google us. We'll pop right up to the top. You can find it, Rebranding Motherhood. However, we can support you. Please feel free to jump into my DMs. We are always here. And last thing I'll leave you with is you are doing an amazing job. Okay. If no one's told you that today or yesterday, please let me be the one that gets to have the honor of reminding you that you've showed up to your shift. You're here for the long haul, and your kids are going to be eternally grateful for that sacrifice and for you putting in that effort. So, high five to you.
Yes. High five.
High five.
That's great, Tina. Wonderful. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this. This is wonderful. I'm so glad you're here, Tina. And for all of you out there, please take a look. If you want a warm and supportive community and you want very clear instructions on how to do some of these things within our community. You can reach us at the Building Your Family community. We have the information in the show notes. And certainly, please come back next time because we'd love to have you. We have lots of wonderful stories to help. So thanks for coming, and we'll see you next week. Hi, it's Lisa Schumann. I hope that you enjoyed that video, and I hope it helped you. And if it did, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe because that's how we keep going. It's really important to us. And if you liked it, you might like this one.